Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions: the mystery of the Paul Is Dead hoax, the conspiracy theory that Paul McCartney was killed in 1966 and replaced. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction, not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. In October 1969, a caller to an Ann Arbor, Michigan radio station told the DJ Russ Gibb of WKNR-FM that Paul McCartney of the Beatles was dead. Not dying, not sick, but dead, having been killed in a car accident in November 1966, replaced by a lookalike named William Campbell or William Shears, depending on the version, and the surviving Beatles having hidden the truth in elaborate clues embedded in their album covers and lyrics. Gibb was skeptical but intrigued, and he spent the rest of his broadcast discussing the theory with callers. The next morning, a University of Michigan student newspaper published the theory. By the end of the week, it was a national story. The Paul Is Dead conspiracy theory is a masterclass in the human capacity to find patterns. Played backward, Revolution 9 apparently says, "Turn me on, dead man." The Abbey Road cover shows the Beatles walking in the order of a funeral procession, the undertaker, John, the corpse, Paul, walking barefoot, out of step with the others, the gravedigger, Ringo, and the preacher, George. The license plate of the Volkswagen Beetle, parked to the right of the walking figures, reads 28 IF, which Paul's age would have been if he had lived. Actually, it would be 27, not 28, one of many factual errors in the theory that its proponents overlook. The SGT, Pepper's album cover, shows the grave of Paul McCartney. The number 3 on the drum kit is actually the letter MP. McCartney passed, or missing Paul. The Paul Is Dead theory was a hoax, almost certainly a deliberate one, created by a University of Michigan student as an elaborate joke. Paul McCartney was not dead in 1969, is not dead in 2024, and has given numerous demonstrations of his continued corporeal existence in the intervening 5 decades. But the theory spread with extraordinary speed in 1969, despite the obvious availability of Paul himself for comment, and it continues to attract adherents today who are convinced that the real Paul died in 1966, and that the current Paul is an impersonation. The Paul Is Dead story is not really about Paul McCartney. It is about what happens when human pattern recognition runs off-leash in a rich symbolic environment. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we go further, if you are finding this investigation compelling, please take a moment right now to like this video, drop a comment below with your thoughts, and share it with someone who loves a good historical mystery. If you are watching on YouTube, hit subscribe and tap the bell icon so you never miss a new episode. If you found us through Facebook, tap follow on our page. It takes just a few seconds, and it genuinely helps us keep making these documentaries. Now, let us get back to the investigation. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the landscape of modern documented mysteries, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. The 20th and 21st centuries were supposed to be the age of answers. Science had decoded DNA, split the atom, put humans on the moon, and mapped the genome. By the logic of accelerating discovery, every mystery should be converging toward explanation. And yet the ledger of genuinely unexplained phenomena, events witnessed by credible observers, investigated by serious researchers, and still lacking a satisfying account, has not shrunk. If anything, it has grown. Part of this is a failure of classification. Phenomena that do not fit established categories tend to be dismissed rather than investigated, filed under anecdotal or mass hysteria, and removed from serious consideration. This is not always wrong. Genuine hoaxes and misperceptions account for a large portion of anomalous reports. But the dismissal is sometimes premature, and the cost is real. Cases that might have yielded genuine insight are closed before they are fully examined. Witnesses are discredited. Evidence is lost. The question is never properly asked. The cases that endure, that survive rigorous scrutiny, and still refuse to yield to conventional explanation, are a small but significant set. They share certain characteristics: multiple independent witnesses, physical evidence consistent with witness testimony, and a complete absence of any plausible prosaic explanation that accounts for all the data. These are not ghost stories. They are open problems in empirical science, waiting for someone with the right tools and the intellectual courage to take them seriously. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding the Paul Is Dead hoax, the conspiracy theory that Paul McCartney was killed in 1966 and replaced, is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. The specific claims of the Paul Is Dead theory center on supposed clues embedded in Beatles recordings and album artwork from 1966 onward. The major clues cited include the SGT. Pepper's cover, a floral arrangement allegedly in the shape of a left-handed bass guitar being Paul's instrument, and other grave imagery elements. The Abbey Road cover discussed in The Hook. The White Album played backward. I'm so tired apparently says Paul is dead, miss him, or similar. And the phrase number 9 in Revolution 9, which played backward sounds like turn me on, dead man. Most of these clues require significant linguistic flexibility. Why or specific expectations to perceive. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered the theory's specific timeline holds that Paul died in a car crash in the early hours of November 9, 1966, a date chosen partly because 9-11 has apocalyptic resonance in the theory's mythology. He allegedly ran a red light, was killed, and was replaced by William Campbell, or alternatively Billy Shears, a character from SGT. Pepper, who was the winner of a Paul McCartney lookalike contest, and underwent plastic surgery to complete the impersonation. The surviving Beatles, horrified at the prospect of the band's commercial collapse, agreed to the cover-up and began embedding clues in their music out of guilt. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine the 1969 Ann Arbor radio broadcast by Russ Gibb is typically cited as the origin of the conspiracy theory's mass spread, but the theory appears to have existed in a smaller form before Gibb's broadcast. The University of Michigan student Fred Labeur wrote a widely circulated article, McCartney Dead, New Evidence Brought to Light, that elaborated the theory extensively and added new clues. Labeur later admitted he invented most of his specific evidence as satire. The combination of Gibbs' broadcast and Labeur's article created the template for the theory's rapid spread. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation, but the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, Paul McCartney, the actual living person, was in fact alive and accessible throughout the entire Paul Is Dead period of late 1969. He was living at his farm in Scotland, having withdrawn from public life after the Beatles' recording sessions finished, and was reached by Life magazine reporter Dorothy Bacon, who traveled to Scotland, photographed him with his family, and published a cover story in November 1969 explicitly disproving the death theory. McCartney's response to the whole affair was reportedly amused exasperation. He later said it was good publicity and that the world went crazy while he was alive and well and living in Scotland. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of the backwards masking element of the Paul Is Dead theory. The claim that messages can be heard when records are played in reverse reflects a genuine psychological phenomenon called phonetic reversals or reverse speech. The human auditory system is very good at finding speech patterns in ambiguous sound, and when told in advance what to listen for in a reversed recording, listeners frequently perceive the suggested phrase. Studies of reverse speech have found that listeners who are not told what to hear in reversed recordings perceive essentially no intelligible speech, while listeners given a transcript of the hidden message reliably perceive it, confirming that the perception is driven by expectation rather than actual phonetic content. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding. The Paul Is Dead theory is significant in the history of conspiracy thinking because it was among the first major modern conspiracy theories spread through mass media, radio, newspapers, rather than through personal communication, and because it was accompanied from its beginning by elaborate evidence, the clue hunting methodology that required active participation from believers. The clue hunting aspect of the theory made it engaging in a way that simple assassination claims were not, and it established a template for subsequent conspiracy theories that involve hidden messages requiring interpretive skill to decode. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations, and in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the Paul Is Dead hoax. The conspiracy theory that Paul McCartney was killed in 1966 and replaced. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that the deliberate student hoax theory, the most accurate historical explanation, holds that the Paul Is Dead theory was created by University of Michigan students as a satirical hoax that escaped their control. Fred Labeur has confirmed that his influential article was largely invented, and the theory's origins in a student radio broadcast and a student newspaper are consistent with a prank that was not intended to become a national phenomenon. Under this model, the theory's spread was a demonstration of how a compelling narrative, once launched into a receptive media environment, can achieve self-sustaining momentum that exceeds its creator's intentions. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that the Beatles' deliberate provocation theory, proposed by some music scholars, holds that the Beatles' incorporation of death imagery, backward messages, and ambiguous symbolism in their post-1966 work was deliberate artistic provocation, not to hide real clues about Paul's death, but to create an artistic environment rich enough in symbolism that listeners would find their own meanings. The Beatles in this period, particularly John Lennon and Paul McCartney, were interested in surrealism, aleatory music, and the destabilization of conventional meaning. The clues that seem to point to Paul's death are, under this model, the natural artifacts of a supremely self-conscious artistic enterprise rather than a cover-up. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that the collective apophenia theory is the psychological explanation. The Paul is Dead clues are examples of apophenia, the human tendency to perceive meaningful patterns in random or ambiguous stimuli. The Abbey Road cover, the SGT, Pepper artwork, and the Beatles recordings are all symbolically rich enough to support almost any interpretation if the interpreter is sufficiently motivated. The Paul is Dead theory is thus not specifically about the Beatles, but about the operation of human pattern recognition in a rich symbolic environment combined with a compelling narrative frame, the death of a beloved figure. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the Paul Is Dead hoax, the conspiracy theory that Paul McCartney was killed in 1966 and replaced, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes Fred Labeur's own admission that he invented most of the specific clues in his influential 1969 article, combined with Russ Gibbs' description of the initial radio call as coming from an anonymous caller with an already developed theory, establishes the hoax origin of the theory's most influential iteration. Labeur has described writing the article as deliberately satirical and being astonished at how seriously it was taken. His admission is the most direct testimonial evidence for the theory's status as an invention rather than a genuine discovery. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented the Life magazine photograph of Paul McCartney at his Scottish farm, published in November 1969, is the most direct contemporaneous rebuttal of the death claim. The photographs show McCartney alive, in his own identifiable home environment, with his wife Linda and his children, in images that are clearly not staged or manipulated. The continued existence of Paul McCartney, documented photographically and through public performances for more than 55 years after his alleged 1966 death, is the most comprehensive evidence against the theory's core claim. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed. Acoustic analysis of the backward masking clues has consistently found that the speech-like sounds in reversed Beatles recordings are products of acoustic ambiguity rather than hidden messages. Multiple academic studies of phonetic reversals have confirmed that perceived speech in reversed recordings is generated by listener expectation rather than actual phonetic content. Listeners who are told what to hear perceive it. Listeners who are not told perceive nothing intelligible. This debunks the specific evidence mechanism used by Paul Is Dead proponents without requiring assessment of any individual clue. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the Paul Is Dead hoax, the conspiracy theory that Paul McCartney was killed in 1966 and replaced. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. The Paul Is Dead conspiracy theory continues to attract adherents in the 21st century, primarily through YouTube and social media platforms. The theory has expanded in sophistication. Modern adherents have developed elaborate comparative photographs attempting to demonstrate facial difference between the pre-1966 Paul and the post-1966 Paul, and some have produced detailed videos analyzing specific Beatles recordings for additional backward messages. Paul McCartney's continued productivity as a performer, his 2023 Glastonbury headlining performance at age 80 was the most viewed in the festival's history, has not diminished the theory's following. The Paul Is Dead theory is now most often cited as an example of how conspiracy theories function psychologically and sociologically. The theory's combination of pattern hunting, backward masking claims, and specific evidence that requires interpretation makes it a useful teaching case for media literacy and critical thinking courses. Its longevity, more than 55 years after Paul McCartney failed to die, is itself remarkable and points to the truth that conspiracy theories are not primarily about the facts they cite, but about the psychological and social needs they fulfill. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the Paul Is Dead Hoax, the conspiracy theory that Paul McCartney was killed in 1966 and replaced from the historical record through the physical evidence across the competing theories and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Paul Is Dead ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please help us reach more people. If you are watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new documentary. If you are watching on Facebook, tap the follow button on our page to stay connected. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.